Cool. I'm going to wait. I think when you press record, there's going to be a voice saying this meeting's being recorded.
Yeah, let's see.
Right, there we go. Patience. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Nadia Khan. I'm the founder of Women in Control, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about my journey and kind of about Women in Control, why I started it up. I've got a short presentation of around 20-ish minutes, and then hopefully have some time for questions at the end. So I'm just going to start off by sharing my screen. Can you all see that? And I can see all of you as well. Wicked. So just a bit of background about me, first of all. As I said, my name is Nadia Khan. I've been working in the industry for around 20 years now. I started out in music PR. That was my first kind of step into the industry. I got work experience in a music PR company in North London. And then following on from that, I left and started my own management company up and continued to do PR. And over the years have built independent artist businesses, run independent record labels, and ran successful marketing campaigns for my artists to kind of get top 20 success. And I've been doing music management specifically for 16 years. And I still manage my first ever client that I picked up for management 16 years ago as well. So I wanted to share some of my experiences of kind of, working in the industry. Obviously, when I started out 16 years ago, specifically in music management, it was a very male dominated job area, and the industry is extremely male dominated as well. I really went into the industry kind of really having a lot of self-belief and drive and ambition, and didn't see myself as any different. But it was only when I was starting to work within the role of management that I noticed that I started to get treated differently because I was a woman. So over the years, different experiences that I've had, going to festivals or going to clubs and getting to the door and just being turned away by security. I've been laughed at by security who have just completely disbelieved that I, as a female, could be the manager of an artist. I've been thrown off festival stages by security as well while my artist is on stage performing, and it's so loud, there's not really much I can do about it. And these things happen a lot. I've been completely ignored, whether I'm at venues, in dressing rooms, or by production. So it's been really hard to kind of have to assert myself. Or there's been so many times that I've gone to video shoots that I've set up, I've commissioned, I've put everything together, and I've walked in and automatically somebody that's there will assume that I'm a stylist or a makeup artist, that I'm an extra, and try and usher me into a room. And then obviously I'll say, I'm the manager. And there's a lot of this is kind of down to unconscious bias. So I think throughout my experiences in the industry, that kind of what led me to want to start Women in Control. I also felt and noticed that a lot of the industry was very male dominated, but also there was like an old boys club mentality within the industry. And I noticed a lot of women that I was working with, without generalizing, we just kind of tend to keep our heads down and do incredible, great work and feel that we're going to get recognized or celebrated or promoted off the back of that. Whereas men do tend to go into positions and be more strategic and make strategic relationships and tend to advance in their careers further. And that's something I noticed around me. I was working with some incredible women over my career, over the first 10 years of my career. And I noticed that these women weren't getting talked about and promoted in the same ways that their male counterparts were. And that's something that I wanted to highlight. And also within my own experience, I found myself becoming increasingly invisible in a lot of situations where I'm putting on, international tours, big arena tours, but I'm still having these same situations, even though I'm getting to a really successful point in my career, that I'm just being completely ignored or dismissed. So that kind of really shouted out to me that there was a real issue in the industry. And I really felt that women and minorities were completely underrepresented across the industry, and specifically in leadership roles. When I started out, there weren't any female role models that I could look up to in the industry or reach out to or connect with. So I really felt that I was just doing it on my own. And I wanted to look into it further. So that kind of led me to starting Women in Control up. So Women in Control is a not-for-profit organization. I set it up around 3 years ago. How it started was really organically. It just started on something on my Instagram that I was feeling frustrated, as I said, with all the reasons that I mentioned before. And I wanted to start to do what I could to encourage other women to speak out and shout out about their achievements and kind of push them out into the limelight a bit. So I started to just focus on different women in the industry and profile and spotlight them on my social media and talk about why I thought they were amazing and great. And that led to me starting to do panels and events. And part of that was, one, to inspire anybody that was looking to get into the industry to have representation and these great role models working in, you know, marketing or PR or record labels or myself in management, whatever it is, kind of giving an understanding of the different job roles that you can do in the industry. But secondly, to help build confidence and empower the women working within those roles to come out of their shells, really start to shout out about their achievements. And a part of that was my own growth as well. Like I said, you know, I had a lot of success in the industry, but that wasn't correlated with how I was seen in the industry. Like I said, I felt completely invisible. So I've opened up Women in Control to membership last year. We've got over 2,500 plus members and growing. We've also got an online community space. Claire Rose is here in the session as well. She's our community manager, and she's going to be hosting a session later on telling you all about our online community. And Women in Control's aims is to highlight barriers for women in the industry and really create practical solutions for change and drive awareness around that. A lot of our work is based around researching and identifying the barriers that affect women in the industry from the top down. We're also here to champion, lobby, and do a lot of campaigning for diversity, equality, and inclusion across the music industry. And our overall aim is really to create awareness to these issues and really amplify the voices of women and underrepresented groups. And I love data. I'm going to be talking about a lot of data throughout this presentation, and I just think it's such a powerful tool. I think as a woman working in the industry or as a woman working in business, I feel, you know, women get judged so harshly in business. You know, there's a lot of likability bias. You know, success and likability is correlated in a positive way if you're a male, but if you're a successful woman, success and likability is correlated in a negative way. And also when you try to assert yourself as women, you know, we get classed with all these typical gendered language that is only aimed at women, like we're bitchy or we're aggressive. So I feel like data can be our best friend in many ways, because it helps for us to be taken seriously and our issues to be listened to without us being dismissed as being emotional or moaning or just being negative. So that's why I love data. So we're going to take you through some data now about, you know, that and how we can use it and how it's so powerful that we can harness this data and really help to amplify the awareness of issues and drive change. So I mentioned, you know, like a big part of our remit and aims for Women in Control is to identify the barriers for women. And this is the same whether you are going into the industry as an industry executive to work behind the scenes, or whether you're going into the industry, you know, as a musician or somebody on the front line. And the same barriers kind of exist. So, you know, a lot of work has been done across the industry to identify these barriers. I'll take you through some of these now, but literally there's so many. One of them is the income pay gap. And like I mentioned, for musicians, you know, in 2019, the top 10 female songwriters earned 70% less than the top 10 male songwriters. And this is data that PRS released in 2019. So, you know, female artists are paid less. You know, I'm going to talk about a report that I did looking into how women and female musicians are played on radio, and you can see the huge disparities there. And I think that's definitely linked into lower income for women, and that also is linked into why we tend to lose women in the industry as they get older. We lose women in the industry over the age of 35, or you know, when they have kids as well, because they're penalized financially. And the gender pay gap across the industry is documented. I mean, these companies publish these figures every year, year on year, and there's not much improvement on them. But we need to keep talking about this, you know, this data. You know, 29.1% less pay at Universal Music, 26% less pay at Sony Music, 31.5% less pay at Warner Music, 10% less pay at Spotify, 22% less pay at Apple, and 44.5% less at Live Nation. And these figures have been coming out for the last few years, and not much is changing on that. So we know for a fact, you know, a huge barrier for women in the industry is that they're paid less. Like I mentioned, motherhood is also a huge barrier for women in the industry. On a recent report that we did, we spoke to over 100 women that work in radio at commercial stations like BBC, Capital Global, and Bauer stations, as well as some community stations. And 59% of those women said that they felt that having kids has a negative impact on their career. Harassment is a huge issue within the industry. Again, within that same report, we found that 39% of women felt unsafe at work. And, you know, like I mentioned, when we opened Women in Control up to membership, and I've spoken to lots of members and we've held lots of group sessions, unfortunately, the issue of harassment comes up again and again and again. Sexism in the industry is still rife. 61% of women said that they experienced sexist comments about their appearance, and also it was 59% said that they'd experienced sexist comments about their career progression. So that was one of the reports that we'd done and published earlier this year looking into radio. But the first report that we published last year in July 2020 was called The Seat at the Table. And that was specifically looking at the representation of women in leadership positions. And I focused it on the music industry trade bodies to start off with, because they cover and represent a broad area of the industry, whether it's you know, major record labels, independent record labels, artists, managers, songwriters, producers, publishers, etc. So these are the 12 industry trade bodies that were included in the report. So it's the likes of AIM, BPI, Featured Artists Coalition, ISM, IVERS, MMF, MPA, or the Music Publishers Association, the MPG, the Music Producers Guild, MPT, Music Venue Trust, dealing with live industry, PPL and PRS, and UK Music. And I did an analysis kind of looking at the representation of women in CEO positions, chair positions, and in their boardroom and across their senior teams. So you can go and look at the full report, but I've listed some of the key findings. So the key findings on gender, 27% of CEOs across all the trade bodies were women. That actually equated to only 3 female CEOs across all of the trade bodies. And actually the number of female CEOs over the last few years has actually been declining in the industry. And amongst the music trade bodies, a lot of women have been leaving and they've been replaced by men. 9% of chairpersons across the trade bodies in the report were women. That only equated to only 1 female chair across all of the trade bodies featured in the report. Since the report came out, that was the first time I kind of realized there was such a huge issue in terms of there being less female chairs across the industry. So that led to kind of me putting myself forward to become the chair of AIM. I've been sitting on their board for around 3 years now. AIM is the Association of Independent Music, and they represent independent rights holders, which makes up about 25% of the industry. And yeah, I felt it was important to put myself forward because I just didn't understand. I was really shocked by some of this data and stats. In the board room, 30% of board members across the music trade bodies are women. And the lowest representation of women was on the PPL board. There was only 1 woman sitting on a possible 16 seats across the PPL board, which was really shocking. I also did an intersectional analysis in the Seat at the Table report because with all the events that happened last year with the Black Lives Matter movement and the show must be paused, I felt it was really important to shine a spotlight specifically on Black women in the industry as well. At the time, a lot of people and companies in the industry were talking about BAME a lot, and BAME is a really problematic term. I'm mixed race, I fall under BAME, and essentially it just means anyone non-white. So I didn't feel that there was any accurate data out there for specifically Black women. So the key findings from ethnicity point of view, 0% of CEOs across the trade bodies were Black women. There was 0% of chairpersons. There was only 3% of board members across the 12 music trade bodies that were Black women, and that was equivalent of only 5 positions, 5 seats being held out of a possible 185 seats. And there was only 2% employed in team or executive team roles across all of the music trade bodies that were Black women as well. So yeah, some of this data is really shocking. You know, this is just like a summary that I've kind of really blasted through quickly now. You can see the breakdown of, you know, the individual board rooms. Like there's the PPL one, PRS, again, you know, they only had 3 women sitting on their board. And I had a quote from a lot of industry executives in the industry supporting the report. And this is Vic Bain, who's done some incredible research as well, called Counting the Music Industry. If you haven't checked out her research, you should look into it as well. She looked into the representation of women in record labels and publishing companies, and she found that of all the rosters across record labels, there's only 20% of female artists signed in 2019 to record labels, and only 14% signed to music publishers. And she gave me a quote for the report, so I just wanted to read that out. In terms of CEO leadership roles, we've actually gone backwards. 5 years ago, 50% of the trade body CEOs were female, and they've all been replaced by men other than the CEO of PRS, the lone example of a woman replacing a man. And this shows that we cannot be complacent about diversity. It's not something that we did last year and can now put in the drawer again. It's something that needs continual attention, or we slip backwards to the 1970s, it seems. And I also wanted to share a quote from Michelle Escoffery, who at the time of the report was sitting on the PRS board, holding one of the 3 seats that women held, and obviously one of the only 5 Black women that was sitting in the boardroom across the possible 185 seats out of the 12 music trade bodies. Michelle Escoffery has now been promoted to writer-president of PRS as well. And her quote was, although it's been a long-term reality, it's not acceptable to be the only or countable on one hand Black woman in the room, in the studio, on the tour, in the classroom, writing camp, at the award ceremonies, on the panel, or privy to certain conversations. In an age where representation is everything, this disparity we are seeing and experiencing simply just isn't good enough. Change is afoot, and it must be structural, coming from the top down and not just an idea. So that was just a summary of a few slides that you can check out the full report on our website at womenincontrol.com. Following on from the report, you know, we've been having ongoing conversations and getting commitments from various organizations. We're going to be doing a follow-up report in July 2021 to track progress and change, and we need to keep talking about it. You know, at the start I mentioned that, you know, a big aim of our work is to highlight the issues, highlight the disparities, and then work to kind of change those. So within the Seat at the Table report, there's been some really great progress, and other organizations that haven't progressed, and the ones that aren't progressing are kind of really stand out because the industry and women in the industry have come together to really make the Seat at the Table report really get out there, really amplify the message, and make the organizations take note. There's been some big changes across the likes of PPL. They think they've added 3 women to their board. PRS have made, you know, small changes. AIM has gone to 50% gender balance across their board. So the follow-up report in July 2021, later on this year, is going to show exactly how we've changed, and it's through pushing these conversations and kind of driving this awareness and not letting this stop is how we're going to kind of keep going on about it. I wanted to share another report as well. Like I said, you know, we do research and reporting for women that work in the industry from all levels, whether they're entry level up to senior level, but we also look into the industry and look at disparities for female musicians. So as a manager and as somebody that's run independent record labels, I've worked with many female artists, many female musicians, and I noticed a difference when I was going in to pitch female artists and musicians. I was being told by, you know, DSPs or people that I was pitching to, or gatekeepers or playlists, that female musicians don't get received well, they get skipped more, the audience doesn't respond well to them, all these different kind of variety of reasons. And I felt that that was kind of fed into what I was seeing, whether there was less opportunities for women. I feel that women and female musicians get compared to each other, and they're not allowed to kind of be unique. If you look at the number of unique female artists that have kind of blown up, it seems that there's only kind of one spot or a few spots for a big female musician to kind of break through. So there's a lot of areas of disparity, but another report that we did last year was looking into specifically how female musicians are played on radio. And within that, we did analysis of 31 UK radio stations, including top national and regional stations. And I also did a breakdown of the top 100 most played songs in 2020 on radio. Now, for this report, I collaborated with Linda Coogan-Byrne. You might have heard of her gender disparity in Irish radio report that she released in June last year. So after that report came out, I think some of the stats within that were really, really shocking. And me and her had connected because I was about to release the Seat at the Table report. And I said to her, we needed to do this in the UK and come together and do this because it's just as bad here. And I think when I spoke to her originally, I think Linda was like, I don't think it's as bad as it is here. And I was like, no, I'm sure it's pretty widespread over here as well, because I had experienced those same issues. So we kind of followed Linda's format with 31 radio stations, but I added in the top 100 most played songs in 2020 on radio because I wanted to see how women were represented within the top 100 airplay chart as well. So some of our findings were that men feature on 81% of all records in the top 100 most played songs on radio. And this ties into something that has been called the collaboration age. Over the last decade, female musicians are having to collaborate or duet with men or feature on lead male artists' records or male DJs' records in order to have success. So the number of female solo acts has been declining over the last decade, and that's been tracked by some data from the official charts company and also the BBC. But yeah, within the top 100 most played songs on radio from 2019 to 2020, men feature on 81% of those records. When it comes to female songwriters, again, you know, the number was quite shocking, with only 19% of female songwriters being credited on the top 100 most played songs on radio in 2020. This does correlate to membership figures for PRS. So within the PRS membership, the number of female songwriters is around 18.4%. So obviously, you know, again, correlates to the fact of why women and female musicians are getting paid less. And obviously the number for female producers was even more shocking, and women are completely absent, with only 3% of female musicians being credited as producers within the top 100 most played songs on radio. And then within the analysis of the top 20 most played songs in their heavy rotation slots, you can see that male artists are heavily favored on the likes of BBC Radio 1, BBC One Extra, Radio 2, Radio 6 Music having 60%, and on the Bauer radio stations, Kiss playing 75% male artists in their top heavy rotation slots, Kiss Fresh with 90%, and you know, Kerrang and Absolute Radio having only 100% male artists in their top 20 high rotation slots. And Global, again, similar story with 75%. On Capital Extra, 90% male artists, Heart 75%, Smooth Radio 65%, and Radio X 100%. So I think, you know, goes back to what I was talking about why data is so powerful in this, because I've showed this, and when this report came out, and I've spoken to different female musicians, and some of them have got emotional and upset about it, but a lot of them have said they knew it, and it's having this tangible data to understand that we're not just imagining it, this is reality. Let's actually break down and have a conversation about it, because these figures of the lack of female representation are the same across the industry. I mentioned Vic Bain's report with only 20% of female musicians signed to record labels, 14% signed to music publishers, only 18.4% songwriters at PRS. And we're seeing that follow through to the plays. And I feel like, you know, we need to do some more data, some more research into all the different areas to highlight these issues and continue and drive these conversations, because there is a real issue here. Following off the back of this report, you know, I tried to open it up to have conversations with different radio stations. And I know a lot of women that work in radio, and, you know, a lot of it even can come down to unconscious bias, or not even realizing that you weren't programming. I spoke to a few playlisters who thought that they were really programmed a lot of women, and then when they looked at it in more detail, they realized they weren't programming enough women. So it's bringing those issues right to the forefront and having real open and direct conversations about it. And it's not about pointing fingers. I feel the problem with just doing a report in one area is that everyone kind of wants to pass the buck and say, well, we only get sent majority male artists, and if there's only 20% of female artists signed to record labels, then these kind of figures correlate. So it's about us all making concerted effort to kind of understand that this does exist in the industry and what we can do to change it. So so that was a whiz through of some of the reports that we've done. I'm going to close my screen down. So you can go on our website, womenincontrol.com, and you can read some of those reports in full. The Seat at the Table report, the Women in Radio report, and the gender disparity in radio as well. And later on today, Claire is going to be running a session with the community. So I'll put the link into the chat as well, where you can sign up to join the online community. We have over 2,500 members in the main membership, and we have an online community forum space where we have around 600 people of all different levels across the industry, and we kind of come together to share opportunities, our experiences, knowledge, create more awareness, and drive and kind of create more awareness around like any issues or campaigns. So I've got a couple of minutes left to answer any questions, if anybody had any. There's some questions in the chat. Let's have a look. Orla has asked, do you have to pay radio to play your song? Well, the act of paying radio to play your song is payola, and that's not allowed within the industry, but you would pay a radio plugger or and instruct a radio person to come on as your PR, and they would go and speak to different producers or DJs on your behalf. And that's how you would, or you can create your own relationships with DJs or producers of shows and send your music out yourself. But definitely don't ever pay any DJ or person to kind of play your song on radio. How do you think radio stations can be encouraged to play more female artists? I think it's a challenge, because it's been really difficult since the reports come out. You know, a lot of people don't want to engage in the conversation. You know, when you're releasing reports like this with a lot of data, it can feel quite attackful. You know, The Guardian ran an exclusive story when this report was released, and they did get quotes from BBC Radio 1, who came back and said that their playlist was, you know, had like 40% or 35% female artists at the time, which I countered and said, well, that's fine, but you're not playing them in the heavy rotation slots, because female musicians are being relegated to the overnight slots, or they're not getting that same airtime. So even if they're kind of being or advertisers, they're on a certain playlist or an A list or a B list, they're not getting correlated number of slots, and that's leading to less exposure, which obviously ties into the income, and it is really, really difficult, because I've tried to engage with different radio stations, but everyone's quite defensive about it, and I said there's a lot of passing the buck, because it all feeds into everything else. So I think it's a wider effort to really create that awareness, and I also think that publishing data and reports like this actually leads to change, because it starts to challenge those unconscious biases of people in the industry that didn't realize that they were doing it. There's so many great people and women that work in radio. You know, I did a follow-up report just talking to over 100 women that work in radio now across BBC, Bauer and Global, and you know, we had to actually keep the report anonymous, because a lot of women were scared to speak out, because they were worried about losing their jobs. But you know, there are some great people in the industry that that want to support, and it's about using this data in alongside with that and kind of working together. So I think we're out of time for the session, so I just wanted to wrap it up now.
Okay, I am going